So, apparently, as I was asleep in the wee hours of the morning, thinking I was gonna have an entirely new day off, suddenly a bunch of Armored Core 6 preview footage just came out of Summer Games Fest, and we're gonna be watching Vaati's, considering he's been having a deep dive into the series lately. So, let's get comfy. I'm gonna watch this. I probably might get a little excited. We shall see. I'm still waking up, so if I'm a little bit groggy, I apologize. Let's go.
As you watch this brand new footage of Armored Core 6, I'm curious, what do you see? Armored Core or Souls? Truth is, there's a bit of both here, honestly.
Yeah, I can see it.
I recognize the three-dimensional combat of Armored Core. I've seen its familiar mission structure, its atmosphere, and the unrivaled customization potential that the mecha genre lays claim to. But finally, no one can deny that there is a lot of Souls influence in this. This hard lock-on is not traditional Armored Core.
No,
the pacing
not.
and the telegraphed attacks would not look out of place in a Souls game. Even the Stagger system is basically Sekiro's. Now, there's a lot I could say right now, but I'm honestly really tired of this whole debate, and I prefer to move on because there is now so much more to talk about instead. So
yeah, the whole debate of I totally saw that there was still going to be some Souls-like influence, no matter what. Even if it's even the smidgen, it was going to be there. It's a series they've worked on for years. They're going to use what they learned from that into this. So it was a given that this was inevitability. It's now probably for the best, though.
Bandai Namco has given me about 4 minutes of gameplay to share here today, but I've actually seen a lot more than this. Press were actually able to see a live demo of basically this entire mission. And you know the best part of that live demo? It's that, unlike in this gameplay, the HUD, the heads-up display, was completely enabled. I paid a lot of attention to that.
I want to see the HUD!
While I don't have any footage of it, this is roughly what it looks like.
Oh?
Feel free to pause here, but I will break down this HUD more in depth later in the video.
No, go back! Go back!
It looks like.
Okay, so he has a bit of a HUD. LB, RB, LA, RA. And this is roughly speed, altitude, AP, repair. Repair? So we'll be able to repair our stuff on the fly a little bit. Scan, expansion. Okay. Okay. Oh, and a bit of a radial thing down the bottom. Interesting. I kind of want to see it more. I can't judge it until I fully see it and see the context of behind the majority of this, especially down over here. Probably that's where the weapon systems are.
Feel free to pause here, but
I guess.
I will break down this HUD more in depth later in the video so that you can understand it all. Now, I don't know why they haven't just shown it. I think it's actually the most genius part about the game that I saw, and I can't wait to explain why. But right now, though, I guess I should just showcase the gameplay that I have been given. In this mission, it's our goal to infiltrate
the Unedited is at the
huge
end of this.
facility.
Right.
It's occupied by dosers, who are addicts, basically. They're people that have been using that substance that's called coral as a drug. But the facility is also occupied by a group of arms dealers who have this RAD logo, and it's their machines that repel your intrusion as well. In the showcase, From Software emphasized the multiple paths that you can take within the mission. You can sort of see those upper and lower paths here off to the left, and they lead to a bridge in the distance, but this player's build, at least, has very efficient flight capabilities, so they use that to take
build has a lot
direct
of air
approach. So, obviously, vertical and horizontal flight is a big thing in this game. The energy consumption during vertical flight in particular reminded me a lot of the early generations of Armored Core. So you can fly upwards, but it's probably near impossible to achieve sustained vertical flight. which I think is a good thing, as it stops you from flying over what is clearly more level design than Armored Core has traditionally had, which is amazing. One thing that
Give it
does
time,
seem
someone's gonna
different,
find a
though,
way.
is it seems like you're way more energy efficient while flying and gliding horizontally in this game, which is something that seems to be partly enabled by the assault boost, which is basically a dodge boost that can be held for more distance and a continued overboost, so to speak. Let me just pause here for a second. Did you hear that little beep?
Yes, I did.
So
and I
we're
liked it.
now in range of those enemies down there. And if you could see the HUD, then you would know that our lock-on has just automatically jumped onto the closest one. Our missiles are now primed, and we're now in what I'm calling a soft lock-on state. In this state, we still have really free, unrestrained, unguided movement of our mech, and it seems the lock-on can be freely moved between enemies. This should be more familiar to Armored Core fans because it's closer to the way that lock-on has traditionally worked in Armored Core, where
figured this was
you're
gonna be a thing that was
responsible for
kept.
keeping enemies within your sights in order to shoot at them, and the lock-on kind of does its own thing. So if we fire our missiles now, which they do, you can see one missile fly off to each nearby enemy, stunning them and giving us an opening to dash in and take them out one by one instead. Except at some point, the player locked on manually, and now we've transitioned into what I'm going to call a hard locked on state.
Which is keeping an eye on one enemy at a time. That's going to be interesting for duels.
Now that the enemies are dead, hard lock finally falls off, but wait, there's more enemies up top, so the player goes up and
God, the
commits
movement
to
is so
more
good!
hard-locked combat against them. And again, in this hard-locked state, we see a lock that entirely dictates the direction you're facing. And that is not how lock-on
Have you heard
has
that
traditionally
pipe
worked
drop
in Armored Core.
on MP3?
In fact, the absence of hard lock-on is, I think, actually a big part of what contributed to Armored Core's traditional identity. So instead, you'll recognize this lock-on state from Souls. But before all the Armored Core fans get upset by this, perhaps rightfully so, remember the genius kind of is that the soft lock-on state, the traditional lock-on state, still seems to exist. And I think playing with that lock-on state will be viable, and it will give you benefits, although you're probably missing out by not hard locking on sometimes and allowing the player and their camera to be very bound to a single enemy.
So, the hard lock-on compared to soft lock-on. So, I could totally see people getting mad that hard lock-on is a thing in general. However, I feel like because hard lock-on is a thing that exists, they're gonna make certain bosses and certain, like, duels a lot more tighter. Like, they're gonna throw so much shit at you that you're going to need to be able to see what your enemy's gonna be doing, and they want you to be able to react to the best way you possibly can, than just being, like, sluggishly looking up and down trying to find what the enemy's about to do, and then suddenly you're blasted in the, you're blasted by 20 rockets. Okay, let's keep going.
And have your movement strafe around them perfectly instead.
Again, so sorry if I sound groggy. As I said, I woke up not too long ago.
What's more, in this hard lock-on state, notice how all 4 missiles go to their single target here instead, as opposed to in the soft lock-on state where those missiles were spread evenly around the area to each enemy. That enables some really cool strategy, I think.
Oh yeah.
Speaking of strategy, this player's combat strategy seems to be to use their machine gun to stagger these smaller enemies. Enemy stagger bars are seen here, and they build up visually just like they do in Sekiro, and you can see the moment that stagger kicks in here. In this staggered state, they've said that enemies take a ton more damage, and that makes it the perfect time to hit them with all your burst damage, which this player does with their barrage of 4 missiles. Or another thing you can do while the enemy is staggered is this. You can yeet enemies so far with this kick attack.
That looks so fun.
Though I feel like this enemy only flew so far because it was already staggered, though. In any other situation, the kick attack probably just builds up their stagger meter instead. Next clip. The gate was a major waypoint in the showcase, and it seemed to function a lot like a fog gate would in Souls, except when I watched, the player actually took about 10 seconds to hack open this gate. They were vulnerable the entire time they were doing that, and they even got ambushed during that process, so it's a cool way to sort of stop you from progressing too far. In Souls you can just like run past everything, so it's kind of good that they stop you doing that here. But here they enter a tight corridor, and these in Armored Core traditionally force you to fight quite differently than you would have out in the open. Often in past Armored Core games, your missiles would become useless inside, especially if they're the type that fire upwards or outwards, and your long-range weaponry might not be as good either. So that's why it's a good idea to have some close-range parts to help you out in tight spaces, like shields now, or maybe melee blades as well. Speaking of shields, they've actually added something that I've always wanted them to add in Souls, and that's a timed block system. So what we know from interviews is that shields now have this brief moment when you deploy them where their defense is way stronger. It happens here. See that pulse when they pull it out?
That's what I was looking at.
That should be a moment of optimal block, and that's obviously an incentive to perfectly time your blocks against strong attacks rather than just keeping your shield active all the time. Next, melee weapons. You can clearly do multiple strikes with a lot of these, and having these preset animations makes me think that the blades might be exclusive to the left side, like they are in many previous Armored Core games, rather than being able to dual wield them, although I could definitely be wrong on that. Next, we see the scan function for the first time. Enemies are revealed and can be locked onto through walls. I love this. Being able to peek ahead and think about your strategy is so much better than always being forced to figure things out on the fly. It enables planning based on your build, followed by execution of that plan with your reflexes and your coordination.
Now, is that just the thing you have to put on the AC, or is it something that the AC has on its own?
Speaking of customization, though, next let's talk about build assembly. Garage, which is another huge design pillar of Armored Core.
Okay, AP, attitude. Yeah, here we are. Weight, inload, AP, defensive performance, attitude, stability. This is the dumb stuff I love!
So here we thankfully get an overview of all of the part categories in Armored Core 6. Here are your 4 weapon slots, your 4 frame slots, and then your booster, your FCS lock-on part, your generator, and an expansion slot. This is fewer categories than most Armored Core fans.
It's definitely fewer.
Inside parts, hanger weapons, radiators, those are all missing here. That said, the parts that we do see previewed here do have some great depth to them, so I think that might make up for having fewer categories.
That's
for example,
what I'm
your
hoping
generator.
For. So one of the biggest thing is new game. They definitely were going to take away a lot of the categories, because I'm gonna be fair, and I'm someone who has definitely also played a bunch of the Armored Core games before in the past. All those categories were in a way a little too bloated. They were very bloated. And I know, like, I want complete customization over my AC, no matter what. However, just some of it just ended up becoming kind of redundant over time. It's just more better to make smaller things more dynamic than it is to just have so much of stat fattening over just multiple little parts. At least in my eyes, that's what it is, especially this newer generation. Now, granted, that is to say, I hope this is like severe. Like, yeah, like this one little part is definitely changing something significant down here and here and here. So there's gonna still be plenty to work with. I kind of want a full list of like everything that you could definitely put on. There's definitely plenty of room for builds. Definitely plenty of room.
Your energy now has cooling built into it, rather than radiators being a separate part. And then certain weapons, like this laser dagger, can perform a charge attack if held, which is a depth to the gameplay. You also see certain ranged weapons that have this charging property as well. And then there's missiles, which have unique attack characteristics, as they always have, but their descriptions here are more detailed than ever. Some are capable of multi-lock, which is when missiles fire at multiple targets, which I showed off earlier. Some missiles are better for AoE, creating a damage area. Some are better for staggering enemies like these, which contribute greatly to buildup of ACS strain. And some missiles will just be great for taking out airborne enemies like these, which are
Okay, so there definitely is
slowed down
the dynamic I was hoping
missiles
for
hound
still.
targets during lengthy airborne
Still good
time,
dynamics.
enabling heavy pressure tactics. All these build considerations are such a fun, amazing part of Armored Core that I can't wait for people to discover. And if you're a new player, I think a lot of the time you will be able to get by simply reading these written descriptions, but the real endgame in Armored Core is learning to understand the complex stats and specs of each part seen down here. Though, if you think these stats are overwhelming, I've got news for you. So, this is probably the simplified version. It reminds me a lot of Armored Core 4, where you were shown the most important stats on parts,
Armored Core
but
4, my
then
beloved.
you could toggle the display to reveal this. Yeah, so stats can get pretty intense, and while having a simplified view and glanceable icons is obviously the more modern approach, I really hope that they don't shy away from these overwhelming stat screens, because
I do
they are
hope that's
such
still a thing.
hallmark of the series.
Ah.
In the showcase, the player actually accessed this garage
definitely paint your
mid-mission after being
your
destroyed
AC.
by this quad-legged
I
enemy.
think yes,
Their
you should.
mid-range biped build was having a lot of trouble dealing any
hold on,
kind
hold on.
of
We're going back
damage
to this. We're going back
this
to this.
enemy at range. The player actually acted an approach. I really hope that they don't shy away from these overwhelming stat screens, because they are such a hallmark of the series.
That's painted on. Nice.
In the showcase, the player
Nice.
actually accessed this
Help me.
garage
Hold on, just be sure.
from these overwhelming stat screens.
It's not by
because
this that's
they
affected.
are such a hallmark of the series. In the showcase,
I also noticed that the AC. Hold on. Yeah, if you look here, the AC looks like it's been through the ringer a bit. Like you can see the age on it. So this is probably like one of the starter ACs. I would not be surprised if this was the case. It's either just one of the starter ACs or definitely one of the ones you can pick up that's just like, this AC is a little more,
screens, because
rougher than
they are
most.
such a hallmark of the series.
Now it's a little more cleaner.
In the
with a nice paint
showcase, the
job.
player actually accessed this garage mid-mission after being destroyed by
what?
this quad-legged enemy.
Oh!
Their mid-range biped build was having a lot of trouble dealing any kind of damage to this enemy at range, so they wanted to change their build to an agile, close-range one instead. And they did it all manually, and it took less than a minute, and it was so convenient. Instead of having to do the entire mission again, they simply died, they loaded up the garage from the menu, they tweaked their build, and then they returned to the checkpoint that they had unlocked in their mission.
checkpointing?
They were back with a different build completely.
I thought this was more
As
of a
to the fight
mission
itself,
structure, but
there's actually so much to
okay.
break down in this fight, but the main thing I really want to talk about happens here, where they finally stagger the enemy.
Okay.
Whereas in Sekiro, this would enable an execution on Stagger, in Armored Core 6, it's up to you to fully deliver that execution. The enemy is now taking extra damage, so if you have burst attacks, now's the time. What's more, it seems you can prolong this staggered state with certain attacks, keeping them stun-locked with the right combo, potentially, which might give a really high skill ceiling to this whole process. If you listen carefully here, you can hear a narrator say, "Alright, tourist, that's enough." That's because the enemy leader of this facility has been shit-talking you this entire time. The dialogue that I heard was witty and well-delivered, and that is a very welcome change from past Armored Core games. There was also some banter between this narrator and your own female operator, who is there to support you through your missions and warn you about what's ahead. And a main boss is ahead. But before this, in the demo, the player actually called a resupply drone, replenishing their health, their repair kits, and their ammo, and then it was time to fight.
So if you were out of ammo in
a
the
boss
majority of other
that
prior
has its
games,
own
you were
health and
SOL.
stagger meter that appears at the top of the screen. Its attacks are extremely well animated and telegraphed, and it has a ton of area denial and AoE, and it's just so well animated, and it looks like such a great fight. It also has 2 lock-on points, a weak spot at the front, and a shoot at the top, which I guess flying builds might be able to take more advantage of. I wonder how a slow tank build would deal with something like this, though. It seems like it would be hard to get distance and dodge with a tank, hey? Anyway, as promised, let me recreate the heads-up display in more detail, starting with the most important things. First up is your AP.
Even the tank builds that we saw in the gameplay trailer, they still had bursts involved. Like even the ones on the treads were still being able to move just as fast. I'm assuming it would be more so they would have to go circle around this dude still, kind of like Somewhere to Souls in a way.
Your armor points, or your health, basically, which was displayed numerically and with a slider around here. When the player took damage, this number and the slider would obviously deplete, and the screen would also distort a little bit, especially at the edges, which you can kind of see here. Then there was the energy gauge seen around here. This was depleted by things like flight, quick boosting, and I think melee as well. Of course, in Armored Core, how big this bar is determined by the capacity
I kind of wish
of
it was
your
the classic,
part,
it's the energies on the side to the
how fast
left.
it depletes and recovers is determined by the
I
energy
get why it's
output
not
of that generator and the cumulative energy drain of all of your parts. Of course, the efficiency of your boosters will probably also play a part. Above it was a stagger bar. It was empty by default, but would fill up with orange from the center, just like this, whenever you took damage, and then it would deplete if you didn't take damage for a few seconds.
Your own stun.
The same goes for enemies. If you get staggered though, I think you just sort of pause for a couple of seconds, and previous interviews seem to suggest that you'll start falling if you're in the air as well. Next, there was like a box here for the expansion
There's
slot.
definitely going to be weapons
So
that are going to be
extensions are a
tuned
category
to
of parts
stunning the
that
hell out
have
of you.
traditionally allowed you to do unique things like jam enemy radar or shoot down enemy missiles automatically. Sometimes these extensions were activated manually, sometimes they're passive, and they're like my favorite part category in Armored Core because they give a ton of character to your build. Unfortunately, I'm pretty sure the demo had no expansion part equipped, so this box was empty. Next to it were 2 bars. One was a visual indicator for your repair kits, of which the player had 3. Armored Core has never had an Estus flask equivalent before, but it does now.
I'm covering...
These can be activated instantly.
I'm covering the bottom
to heal
left
the
of the
player,
screen,
and
sorry, but...
it seems they can be replenished at supply stations, which can be called in certain missions, apparently. Underneath repair was a bar that said scan. When activated to scan surroundings for enemies, this bar would take a little while to regenerate and then it could just be used again. It wasn't long though, like 10 seconds between each scan maybe. On the bottom right were 4 familiar weapon slots. They showed your total ammo and your remaining magazine ammo for your left arm, left back, and right back weapons respectively. This character has missiles on their right back, a machine gun on their right arm, a shield on its left back, and a blade on its left arm. Now, a recent interview stated that all 4 weapons are bound by default to all 4 controller triggers, and that all of your weapons can be fired at once, which is not how it's worked in any previous game. That sounds kind of insane,
all of them?
honestly, and pretend you're holding a controller. I cannot fathom for the life of me how you're supposed to fire all 4 weapons with your pointer and middle finger, and then doesn't that just leave your thumbs free for assault boosting and moving and interacting and just changing weapons?
You're just unloading.
Just your thumbs for all those actions seems very difficult, so I'm extremely keen to get a hold of a demo and see what the deal is here.
It's not impossible.
There was a vertical speed gauge on the left,
but
there was what looked like an altitude gauge on the right, there was even a compass at the bottom.
Okay, that just tells me burst builds are even more dangerous then. Depending on how much like weapons you can definitely just shotgun or whatever, or even more like forward mounting rocket type attacks. If they're crazy, then they can just unload into you.
That was actually pretty cool because it had red dots for all of the enemies around you, which I assume would actually be pretty useful when helping to locate the enemies that are just outside your field of view. Then the mission objective was written top left, a waypoint marker was on screen for that objective,
big robot,
and killed enemy credit rewards would pop up on the bottom right. Of course, as mentioned earlier, the center of the screen features your fire control system, your lock-on, essentially. It's circular like it was in Armored Core 5, and while you're out of combat even, it stays in the center of your screen, and it has these sliders that help you keep track of your remaining magazine capacity as you fire your left and right arm and back weapons, which I'm a huge fan of.
I am a fan of that. I'm a
the
very
UI
big fan of that.
Nice. It's super clean and it displays a ton of information, but it's this lock-on behavior that I think is the most fascinating thing.
Why didn't they just show off the UI earlier then?
And this is the part of the UI that I kind of love the most. So again, when you get in range of an enemy, this lock-on element jumps over to them, while the lock-on display itself starts to display that enemy's health and stagger meter at the top, in addition to your ammo in the bottom left and right. Inside the lock-on though, there's this little number which dictates how many of your missiles will go to this enemy should you fire them. Again, if you're soft locked on, that number will be split between nearby enemies, and if you're hard locked on, all of your missiles will go towards them. Additionally, the lock-on actually updates with an enemy's distance from you, which is extremely important information because staying at optimal weapon range is a really big thing in Armored Core. And it also shows little damage numbers which pop up as you pop off, and that's really important to give you visual feedback on the effectiveness of your range or the effectiveness of your weapon type. You want to know if you're dealing damage, and I always loved this feature when it was added in Armored Core 4, so I'm very glad to see that return.
That's a nice little return.
Some little enemy status words pop up around the lockbox, like unaware would pop up if the enemy didn't know you were stealthed, and ACS load limit, I think, popped up if you staggered them. So this lock-on is doing a lot of heavy lifting in Armored Core 6, and I love it. I'm glad they've baked so much information into this UI because that is such a huge part of what Armored Core is all about, and what their design team deserves props for is the fact that they've baked all this information in while keeping everything looking sleek and unobtrusive. It's very clever design, and I hope they show off the HUD soon because I'm probably just butchering it in Photoshop now. I have so much more to say about this demo, but it should probably wait for when we get new footage, or for if I get my hands on it, if I'm lucky. In the meantime, if you're curious about Armored Core, then please check out my recent video where I show off every single old Armored Core game. And
Vaati went through the madness
always stand as a way for you guys to learn a ton about the series. If you
I highly recommend go watching that video of his. It's a good treat.
I had an amazing time playing all of the old games. But until next time, thank you for watching. I also want to say special thanks to Con from Bandai Australia for getting up at midnight to pass me this footage. That was so appreciated, and it's honestly half the reason I had enough time to edit all of this for you guys. So thank you, Con. And the same goes for Steven at Bandai and countless others who just enable these kind of demos and previews behind the scenes. Thank you. And if you're a content creator who couldn't get access, then you're more than welcome to react to this video and to this footage. I hope it helps somewhat. But thank you again for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Thanks, Vaati. That's nice of you. Okay, so now we're on the unedited footage of it. A little on the quieter end. It could just be from what they gave to us, though. Okay, so yeah, it's similar to what he's showing. Definitely looks a lot... Yeah. I don't know how to put this. I don't know how to say more than what I've already seen in the footage, but... You are given a beneficial amount of flight. It could just be because you're not exactly a heavy horror at the moment. But you do have some serious airtime. Like, you're clearing this distance pretty easy. Yeah, some of the sounds in this footage is a bit muted. It's so weird. Still, the sound effects I love. Oh, I'm gonna have fun with this game. I'm just gonna have fun. Even though, like, a fair bit of it has definitely changed. Like, I would say the only thing... Now, I can't judge it. I can't judge any part of the UI until I fully see it. Whoop. And... yeah. Oh, now the sounds are better here. I was that. I'm not gonna say anything more. So, well, it's a little quiet but less muted. Oh God, yes! Just love the look and the animation, the feel of it all. Ah! Sonar thing is interesting, but it's like, man, that can easily be abused. Like, only 10 seconds of a cooldown on that? It's not bad, but... Nah. I mean, it's just to get like a peek around the corner, mainly. And it doesn't seem like to be the biggest of radiuses as well. Alright, the garage. I am loving everything I'm looking at right here. Oh, I want to read one of these. Bipedal legs for a scout ECs developed by RAD. Originally spec'd for surface surveys of astronomical objects, this model makes up for what it lacks in combat performance, with light energy footprint and commendable ease of use. Light reverse legs developed by, not gonna say that name right now. These legs sacrifice stability and defensive performance to provide exceptional jumping performance, enabling agile transitions to aerial combat. So is that company's forte. But you are losing so much, yeah. So this is definitely more for like mobility. Wait, yeah, weren't these legs in the trailer, and the initial gameplay trailer where it it's like kick, hit? If you remember what I'm referring to, there's a moment where there's like similar legs and they are actually outright kicking the enemy, but like they're doing like multiple kicks. Generator. Circulating current generation. Circulating current generator developed by Quibas. I need to hear the names first before I can pronounce them correctly. Designed with a focus on capacity and output to support energy weapons. It supplies more raw power than any other corporate product on the market. Raw power, but is it efficient? That's gotta keep that in mind. And then you see the paint job, right? Yeah. That's gonna be fun. Oh. I'm liking the music. I'm liking the music. Ha! Oh, I love the impact sound. I love the impact sound. Seriously, why didn't they just show off the UI? It's like only 2 months out. I'm gonna assume there's gonna be one more full-on gameplay footage later on. So this guy's definitely a specialized boss. This honestly feels like the most souls in this game. It's a big, like, mechanical or destructive monster, and you're the tiny little thing that's to fight it. Okay, it looked like there you got stunned. And then he does his... and then, yeah, the wind-up hits and all that. Okay, this was wonderful to watch and good. Please go give Vaati a subscribe. This was a joy to see in the morning. I'm gonna go get properly hydrated, and I'm also gonna go ahead and edit this footage. Thank you for watching and subscribe, and hope to see more Armored Core soon, because I want this game in my hands, damn it! Take care.